I want to welcome you to the public scoping meeting for the Albion River Bridge. Big turnout tonight, so thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule. We've got quite a few folks from Caltrans represented, as you noticed, with the vehicles in the parking lot. So I'm going to go around the room and make a few introductions to staff that's represented. If I can pick them out in the room here, I'm going to start with Steve Hughes. Steve right here raising his hand. Steve is the North Region Supervising Transportation Engineer over the design branches for North Region. Tom Phillips, right behind him, is the Project Engineer for the Albion River Bridge Replacement Rehab Project, and will also be the Project Engineer for the separate rehabilitation project. Also tonight we have Sandra Rosas, who's the North Region Supervising Environmental Planner. Sandra's over here. She's got to raise her hand because she's vertically challenged there. Yeah. Adele Pomerick, who is over here in the back, is our Senior Environmental Planner for the Albion River Bridge project, and will also be the Senior Planner for the separate rehabilitation project. Also tonight is Liza Walker. Liza is our environmental coordinator. Jennifer Osmondson, next to her, our project biologist. Steve Werner in the back here, who's our engineering geologist, who has been in charge of getting the treated wood waste report and the preliminary site investigation, and is currently working with DTSC, and he'll provide a brief update on that this evening. Also in the back helping out is Rebecca Law, our project analyst, Phil Frisbee, our public information officer, and of course, our bridge designer, Kevin Harper, right in here next to Steve Hughes. So tonight, we're basically kicking off the environmental process, and we're going to talk a little bit about what CEQA is, and maybe Sandy would like to come up front here, because tonight's program is more about environmental than anything else. Our public scoping meeting really begins the formal environmental review process for this project, and this is our opportunity to solicit comments from you, the community, on any issues and concerns that you feel need to be discussed in the EIR. And again, this really indicates to you as the community that an environmental impact report will be prepared for this project. So I think before we jump into that, I'll make a quick comment on the separate project I know a lot of you are interested in, and that's the rehabilitation of the bridge deck and the replacement of the bolts. And that project came to the district from headquarters. Our project sponsor, Maintenance Engineering in District 1, and the program advisor in headquarters had worked together to put together what's called a project initiation document. And within that project initiation document, there were several scope items, one of which was to replace the entire timber decking and replace bolts, and also some of the timbers that were rotten. Well, the PDT met, and after reviewing the bridge inspection reports, and part of our due diligence, we asked for the deck to be poured, because we wanted to confirm that, in fact, the deck was rotten, as indicated in the bridge inspection report. Well, maintenance went out and did the pouring and found out that the decking was in better shape than thought. So based on that, there were a couple different recommendations that came from our maintenance engineering branch on either a full grind and repave, or possibly using a bonded wearing course. Now, our materials branch is still looking at different options for repaving that deck, and based on that change in the scope of work, the project sponsor, Maintenance Engineering, and the program advisor in headquarters are repackaging that project with a new estimate, and then they'll send that project back to the district, and then the PDT will pick it up again and we'll begin work. So right now we're waiting for decision from the project sponsor and the program advisor on what the final scope of work will be included for that project. And I think we'll go into talking a little bit about CEQA, and Sandra Rosas, who's our supervising environmental planner, who's got a lot of experience in this area, going to talk a bit more about that.
Okay.
Sandra?
Well, welcome everybody for attending. Now, I know some of this information was sent out by Frank, and I guess it was dispersed to, I think, to the
Probably everybody in this
right?
room,
Yeah.
if they've got email.
So I'm not going to read over everything, but basically what we have here is the notice of preparation was sent it out. It was, and so that's kind of just tells everybody that we're going to be doing an EIR. So what we're geared to do here is trying to get some comments, solicit some information from the public to kind of say where our impacts are, kind of focus more on the environmental side of the house. I know a lot of people may have some, comments regarding the bridge itself and design, but really the process that we're looking at is actually telling the folks that, yes, there's a project and we would like to hear from you, and kind of just the comments. We're going to be mostly focused on the environmental impacts, but you'll have opportunities later in the process. With the NOP, we have a 30-day process. We get comments from the public and from the resource agencies, and then as we start the environmental document, in the draft phase, we'll have another formal hearing. At that point, we'll have a court reporter, and then we'll have more. There'll be more opportunities to actually get more comments from the public, and from regulatory agencies. So we're here to get as much information as we can.
And staff is here to help you
out.
articulate whatever questions you might have about the specific alternatives that have been described in the NOP. There are a number of handouts that many of you have probably already seen, from the 2009 PSR to the VA study, the feasibility study transmittal, and the APS pricing update. That's the advanced planning study, excuse me, pricing update for the alternatives. And we also have a very important handout that will help you better understand what the process here at Caltrans is. It's how Caltrans builds projects. Along with that, you'll find just a layout of where we are in the process with the proposed schedule right now for the replacement rehab project. And please just circulate around the room. We'll go ahead and just answer any questions that you might have. Before we do that, though, Steve, you might come up and just give an update on a couple items. I know that the community is very interested in our progress with the coordination with DTSC having to do with the preliminary site investigation and treated wood waste report. So, Steve, maybe just a quick summary of those two reports and maybe an update on our task order with DTSC and go from there.
Okay.
I have a question before you start.
Yes, Warren.
You used lots of acronyms which I absolutely do not understand.
And I apologize for that. Sometimes that's the world we live in, and certainly I'd be more than happy to clarify any of those. So do you have one in particular?
No, but I thought, I don't know if this would be helpful to others or it's just me, but as you go along, if you have an ASP, well, what does that mean?
Yeah, APS, Advanced Planning Study.
Thank you.
Okay.
And notice of preparation is, you got, okay, all right, good.
Yeah.
And the EIR, Environmental Impact Report. And
That
then
one.
CEQA,
Okay.
California Environmental
Question.
Quality.
PSR and PTSC.
Pardon me?
PSR and PTSC.
Yeah, PSSR is a preliminary scoping document report, and what was the other one?
PTSC.
Oh, DTSC, that's the Department of Toxic Substances and Control.
Thank you.
So let me just start out. My involvement with this project was the community wants this wood in the bridge. And they came to me and said, we can't let the community have this wood in the bridge because it's full of wood preservatives and it's illegal to recycle in that way. It's got to go to a landfill. So Frank said, we've got to really prove this point that it's really full of wood treatment chemicals. So I went out there and did a bridge survey, and we looked at the lead and asbestos and the wood preservatives on the bridge. There's a little asbestos in there. There's lead paint on the metal truss section, and there's some lead paint on the white bridge rail. And the wood preservative is used in the 1930s. It was called the Waldron wood salt preservative method. It's a wood preservative that isn't used anymore. It's got, basically, it's arsenic and chrome. So we documented that the wood certainly is full of, arsenic and chrome. And Frank said the community is very interested in whether any of that has been released into the environment. And in my mind, I'm thinking, well, of course it has, because, it's been documented that wood preservatives come out of treated wood, even the modern ones. So whenever you use treated wood around your home, keep that in mind, that those chemicals that keep the bugs out actually come out of the wood. And in fact, this wood on this bridge is leaching those metals that preserve the wood. Basically, arsenic is the biggest factor, the most concentrated metal in the bridge. So we've came out during a rainstorm and actually put a sample bottle, under the bridge and filled it up and sent it to a lab. And in fact, there's arsenic, coming off the bridge when it rains. And it's coming out at a concentration that's basically 30 times, 40 times drinking water standards. So we obviously have a concern for the community, and we know our bridge is leaching arsenic in the environment. So we went to the county and talked to Trey Strickland. He said, this isn't something we really regulate. You need to find, a state agency to oversee what you found. So they said you could talk to the Water Board or the DTSC. So DTSC, Department of Toxic Substance Control, they have toxicologists and environmental scientists, and we thought that would be the agency that really should oversee this study that we're going to be doing to evaluate the effects of the arsenic coming off the bridge. So we have been discussing the issues with them. We've given them all the information that we've had, the same ones, of course, that we've put on the internet. And we're in the final stages of getting all the paperwork signed. It takes a while. The gears of government get turning. We had to find the funding, write the task order, agree to certain fees, develop a scope of work. They have agreed to come and talk to the community. And so we're almost in the final stages of getting those documents signed and getting the funding in place. In the next couple of weeks, we hope to have a meeting with DTSC and our consultant. And at that point, we're going to probably be directed to do a preliminary endangerment assessment. And basically, they're going to tell us what to do. They're the toxicologists and the environmental scientists. They're going to say, study what's living in the water maybe, study the plants, maybe study the human health. They're going to tell us what to do. They're going to drive that boat because we really don't have the expertise to do that. They're going to tell us what they want us to study. We're going to write up a work plan. Our consultant will write up a work plan and say, okay, this is how we're going to study this and how we're going to study that. And this is where we're going to drill some holes, and these are where we're going to take samples of whatever you tell us to do. We'll give that back to them as a draft work plan, and let's say we want these changes, or they'll say it's good, or whatever. Whatever they tell us to do, we're going to be doing. And we're going to go down that path and study the issues dealing with the arsenic coming off the bridge.
And we've also put the project manager at DTSC in contact with Bill Heil, and I think Bill may have contacted them. Bill, is that correct?
Yes, I haven't heard any word back.
Okay, and they've offered to come and speak to the community separately, so you can count on their coming and providing you with critical information that I know you're all interested in.
So maybe they haven't talked to you because we don't have the final funding paperwork signed, because they expect to get paid by the hour for all the work they do for us.
Holding my breath.
Okay. The gears are moving slowly, but they're moving.
Yeah, we got to sign the task order first.
And a lot of this data is going to be also disclosed in the environmental impact report. So
Will Fish and Game be involved in this also?
Well, they're an agency that can talk to DTSC, but they're going to be the primary agency driving this boat. But the Water Board can talk to them and tell them things that they think should be studied, as well as Fish and Game.
And I'm certain that they'll take input from the community.
There's a meeting tomorrow in Ukiah. The
with
agencies
the
will be...
resource agencies. And this will be a discussion potentially with the agencies, this issue. So.
Okay.
If the committee doesn't have a question, I have a question. My name is Hassan Astane. I'm not a community member, but I'm technical advisor to a group of community members. My question is, you mentioned that there is leaching of hazardous chemicals, and you measured it when there was a rainstorm. So I have a couple of questions. Maybe Frank can help in some. First of all, how many timber bridges do you have in California?
Well, we're not here to really answer those questions. I didn't come prepared with the list of timber bridges.
No,
This is,
because
Hassan,
there's
this is
a
a
follow-up
public
question.
scoping meeting. This is a public scoping meeting, and we're more than happy to answer questions on any environmental issues and take comments on comment cards. But the whole idea here is to take comments on those comment cards and get them into the record, and we'll respond. So what we are looking to do here is to get the community to circulate and talk to staff, yourself included, and fill out the comment cards and leave them with us so that we can go ahead and compile them. Now, we're not, I mean, as far as how many bridges are in, wood timber bridges in California, I'm not a bridge engineer, and we're not here to answer those types of questions, Hassan.
You should be relaxed, because that question is related to what I'm going to ask gentlemen who did the chemicals. Anyway, there are about 800 timber bridges, and those timber bridges, most likely, many of them, have the same arsenic and chrome treatment. My question to you is, because you said that you looked into the leaching, and you mentioned something important which the community heard, and you said that the amount of leaching is 30 times more than drinking water. So that's very sensational to say, oh, it's 30 times more than drinking water. But is this the standard of Caltrans to measure the amount of hazardous material that is leaching from a timber bridge based on how much it is compared to drinking water?
I just threw that out there for a matter of comparison, sir.
Yeah, we have to be careful that you're getting data here and community is listening to your data and they are thinking, oh my God, it's 30 times. Anyway, so.
Yeah, well, it's 0.34 parts per million.
So my question is engineering. I'm here to ask engineering questions that community members, some of them, at least,
Okay, now,
told me to come and
Hassan,
ask.
this is a public scoping meeting, and the idea of this public scoping meeting is to take comments from the community. And in the agenda, it says today's meeting is not intended as a forum to discuss the merits of the proposed project. We're looking to get comments from the community specifically on environmental issues that should be included in the EIR. And we would like to see the community circulate and speak with staff, and we will be here to help answer questions and help articulate some of those comments that the communities look to place on those cards. So I don't want to get bogged down in a meeting here where we're doing a Q&A session. That's not the purpose of this meeting. Okay?
The purpose of this meeting is a public meeting required by California Environmental Quality Act to be held as a scoping meeting. There's a special act part, the third part of it, and I don't think, Frank, with all due respect, Caltrans can change the law regarding the California Environmental.
We're not looking to change the law.
The law defines what is scoping meeting.
That's correct.
The law says scoping meeting is for public community to come there. It doesn't say community members can only ask questions. In fact, I'm the agent of some community member groups. So I'm here to ask questions that community members ask me to ask.
To be part of the record, it has to be on a
Cannot
comment
be-
card, and
Yeah, because
Yes.
at this point, we
Sandy,
don't
would you-
have the
When you
ability
present the
to.
data, I'm here to ask questions about that. This is engineering discussion. You have a duty, of course, to manage the
you're
project.
more than welcome to have a conversation with
Okay.
Steve Warner. He's the engineering geologist, and that's perfectly
But
fine.
the
But
problem is this. The problem is that this is a public meeting you're recording. He made that comment 30 times more than drinking water, which I guess you agreed that it's not really engineering data to give to public. You just said that I said it. You have to give engineering data. And if that's the standard that you compare to drinking water, and this is 30 times more, and that's bad, fine. But You
Did
cannot
you read the
just manage the
did you read the
meeting
preliminary
and
site
ex-
investigation report?
What am I
Hassan, did you
Jeff?
read the preliminary site investigation report?
You're not here to ask questions, you're here to collect questions.
Well,
I'm
if your
fine,
question
but-
is relative to what Steve just said, then my comment would be.
I think
that-
public will be served if you ask any question that comes from someone who might know something about one engineer or one chemical tester, that what is wrong with answering questions?
We're not looking to stop anybody from asking questions. The idea
Would you
is to
answer
put the
that question if I
comments.
asked Carol, for example, to ask that question?
Pardon me?
Would you answer the question if I asked one of the community
Well,
members
let's
to ask?
rephrase the question then, Hassan.
Okay, so let's work to the benefit of community, please. You have mentioned several times you want to work with community. Let's do that, and I believe you want to do it. So let's don't go around this thing that you can't say this, you cannot ask this. Just narrow down the path so you can just come up with saying that we did the environmental, scoping, and this is great. There was no question. I asked a good question. So basically, my question, the third question, which I hope you don't mind just stating it, even if you don't answer, is this. You have to tell me if you usually look into this thing and you have done it for other timber bridges, and then you establish that under the thunderstorm or rain, there's certain amount of leaching, and then is there a standard that Caltrans has that then you say, all right, this is the standard and this is more than that standard, then you go to county. Or in this case, you did a test because Caltrans project manager asked you to show that there is some chemical leaching, or maybe some community members asked, fine, that's legitimate. But then you came up with this saying that it's 30 times more than drinking water, and then you went to county. Do you go to county, or do you do actually chemical tests like this for other timber bridges? And if you see there is standard exceeded, then you go to county. That's a legitimate question regarding why.
Steve?
I've not studied any other timber bridges. I know of no other studies that were done of other timber bridges.
No, it's great. I think we should operate this way. Let's ask questions. Let everyone ask questions. I'll wait until community asks questions, but since community members, a few of them have asked me to ask questions that I understand, let's have this. I'll let community members exhaust their questions, but I would like come here to a public meeting, even if I'm not a member of the community, ask questions. You cannot tell me that only community members can ask questions. Even I don't need to be represented by community members. I could just come in because I'm interested in timber bridges. Is that agreeable that we run this meeting?
Thank you, son.
Is this agreeable?
Certainly.
All right, thank you. You
Michael?
answered my question finally. All right.
I take responsibility for kicking this termite mill. I'm the fellow who suggested initially that the Woolman process, which is arsenic, selenium, chromate, and phenols in solution, 72%, was employed. They were kind enough to do a handheld EDXRF analysis, which is
What
just a
is that?
survey.
What kind of analysis is that?
X-ray, fluoroscopy, it doesn't matter. It's just a little box that measures the product of gamma radiation when you spin a molecule. Not to worry. If they followed it up, again, as a community member, making a request for information, I received a copy from their preliminary analysis of the atomic absorption spectroscopy report, which was made available to many people, I think yourself included. And in that report, my background, which I've had to comply with state agencies and federal agencies, and indeed in 3 continents, 2 water quality standards, I know enough only to be dangerous. So when I read that report, they were very careful to point out that the levels of toxicity varied greatly from vent to vent, and where it was essentially staggered. So it's not a tremendous problem, It is a problem. And the information's been made available, and they have taken it to the correct agency, in my judgment, that has, as a lead agency, to essentially address this issue for our community benefit. So, frankly, at this time, it seems to me only that we take our concern and address it as a component of the CEQA process,
I completely agree.
and find out what it is. We make our concerns known, we find out what it is that DTSC is going to come up with. My concern will be, well, what happens when they leave a bridge and the folks that want to maintain it? I think one of the questions we as a community have to ask DTSC is, what steps can you take to protect us in the future, should that bridge remain intact? Or a platform indeed, or a component of it. What do we do? That, I think, needs to be explained by them to the community so that we can evaluate their results. Up to this point, we know nothing other than that very, I think, first-rate atomic spectroscopy analysis of those data, which I know is in your pile, because I've read every single thing that Frank ever sent me, and it's built my character.
Thank you, Michael.
This is exactly, I really appreciate it, and definitely the leaching of chemicals of this bridge is one of the important items for tonight, and it's already there. It doesn't need even to be brought up. That should be addressed not only now, but also for life cycle of bridge. So
It is being addressed.
Because one issue is that this is leaching, so there are problems with leaching that should be looked at into the soil, into the water, into the ocean. These are all different problems. Into the environment that animal habitat is there. I saw actually beavers. Believe it or not, one day when I came to the flats, I was going back, a tree fell in front of me, and I looked at it and saw there are beavers. Those beavers don't like arsenic or anything. So there should be all kinds of issues related to this. And also, that issue should be addressed if the bridge is kept, because as you said, we're not talking about the retrofit or replacement tonight. We're talking about what happens if we keep the bridge to the environment, and what happens if we demolish it. So when you're addressing the issue of toxic, as I agree, it's great that community has someone like you. I remember from the beginning when I came here the first time, when we had a discussion, I was amazed that this issue and painting issue is in one of the best hands. By the way, it's not my area, so it's all up to you to what you're doing. And then the most important thing would be, if the replacement is done, what will be done with this whole 2,000 members that are toxic? You can't burn it, you know it all.
It's been addressed in the treated wood waste report.
So it's a very good item, I think, I'm bringing up. So when I started the question of how many bridges you have, because this is a problem we have in California and throughout the country, and Federal Highway Administration has issued all kinds of reports on these kind of bridges. They even had a report that if you have this kind of treated bridge, arsenic chrome treated bridge, in the sandboxes and playgrounds, you don't need to worry about it. So in this case, the fact that the water is coming down and washing it where? There's whole green. You have to figure out really what's going on. I mean, environmental impact study should address this. It's not just to say that it is leaching, and it is leaching 30 times more than drinking water. It's leaching where? And what happens to that water that drops? Is it going washed to the ocean, or washed to the river, or washed to the flats? And
We definitely will be looking at that. I know DTSD, I know when he brought up the 30 times the normal amount, I think if there was any kind of harm that would be evident, like right away, I'm pretty sure that that agency would have done something at this point. So
If they thought there was an immediate risk, then they would have directed us to do something.
Yeah.
But
At this
my
point,
limited knowledge in this case is that it is not, unless you really touch it, you chew on it, you lick it, like kids do it, you can clearly protect it. You can put even fence around it, nice decorative fence around it, and if you have to replace the sand, you replace it. You have to do it anyway if you demolish this bridge and replace it with another bridge. You cannot leave that sand.
That's, if you look at the treated wood waste report, you'll find some detailed information on how we propose to dispose of the timbers if we do get to that point. So we look forward to your comments on the comment sheet. Hopefully you grabbed one back there, Sam.
What I will do is I will just try to see what I can learn tonight from you and your experts, and bring up certain things that I think I feel I need to know.
Well, again, I want to stress how important it is, folks, to get your comments in writing to us, okay? Because we can talk all night, but frankly, we really are interested in getting your comments in a written form for the record. So please help yourself to the comment forms, thank you, and fill them out, and feel free to talk to staff around the room. We'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Also, there's, in the notice of preparation, Adele Pomeranx, if you can send her, snail mail, we still take those. Emails also, if you wanted to take it home, you wanted to email it, please, you could do that and email it to us. We'd appreciate that also. Any kind of way that we can,
If you want to have somebody help write your comment, you can do that
yeah.
right here.
You mentioned, and I think, Frank, you had mentioned that there's a 30-day period for comment after this meeting.
That's correct.
That's correct?
That's
Not
Is that
after,
correct?
from the date of when we sent out the NOP, when it hit the clearinghouse, which is what date? What's the date? April 1st. So from April 1st on, so the end of April, you have to the end of April for comments.
Okay,
So-
Jim?
So I just want to make sure that everyone is clear on that, is that, the comments that you might have with respect to the environmental impact report don't necessarily have to fit on the index card
Yeah.
that goes into the basket. That we do have until the 1st of May to provide them in written form, like this.
Yeah, and
Or by email, yes.
you could do it by
Email or
email.
written, that's correct.
You can send it to us, any which way form, we will take it. We appreciate everybody that will
Question
comment
back here.
and interest in the project.
Question or comment, your initial speaker was, brought something up that we need to know. We need to know some disposition with regards to the.
Well, the disposition right now is that DTSC has a task order in hand. Yes, go ahead.
I'm just saying, I'm suggesting that you get an early report from the DTSC response to guide us. That's all I'm saying, and that get distributed to the list you have.
Well, as soon as DTSC comes up with what the work recommendations are, I mean, we've kept this community posted on all developments with regard to all studies. So we will go ahead and let you know as the process progresses.
That's a look for it. I had promptly in this case, because this is a gate to the future. I'm not sure we can take it.
Well, DTSC has all the information, and again, if they felt that there was a serious issue, they would have addressed it immediately, and they have not. So we provided them with the information that we have from the preliminary site investigation, and we have a task order in place with them for additional studies. So we're working on it.
That's not, the presentation, as I had the initial presentation, was not that, in my mind. You have not projected.
I think Steve was pretty clear on the fact that we are working with DTSC. We do have a task order in place with them that will be signed. They are reviewing that, and it will be.
They're going to be telling us what we need to study. But I think if they thought there was an immediate health risk to the community, they would have directed us to do some action.
I'm concerned about having that information to lead us to other questions to us.
Okay.
In other words, it's open. This is the big issue that we've been talked about, and it's been disturbing for a few people. So we have don't have enough information to be able to even take any kind of position at all. So as I said, so we're not impressed, which is fully.
Well, as much as we do. We posted the reports.
That's fine, okay, but that's irrelevant. The community needs to know about this because it's an issue.
And we're working on it, sir.
For us to be able to fully respond in that 30 days or whatever.
Are we saying that these other studies may need other questions and it'll be outside 30 days?
Yeah, I think 30 days is to comment on the project. I mean, once these studies get going at GTSD, I know Frank has been very open about sharing all the studies with the community. I'm pretty sure you're going to be sharing
Yeah, this
that.
is going to be an evolving process.
Yeah,
This
we're
isn't-
going to keep
We're
the
not barred
community.
from
It's
Mike
not-
is getting them
Yeah,
straightened out.
you're not going to hear about it when the draft goes out or when it goes circulation. I'm pretty sure Frank has kept an open channel with communication with the community so that when we get studies from DTSD, he'll be sharing it so that you guys will know what they have found and what are the approaches that we're going to do to address the concerns out there with the wood treated.
And the community's going to be able to speak directly to DTSC and
Yeah.
they
in the
can address
process.
your concerns more directly.
Definitely.
And,
So-
you know, you think Caltrans should study something, then talk to them and they can direct us to do that kind of work.
Yeah, Kevin Harper has a comment. Kevin?
I just wanted to, what I remember from this toxicity concern was in previous meetings, there was talk of mitigation measures of a reed platform or reusing some of the timber in the community for like a pathway with small bridges over creeks. And during that discussion, some of the community members wanted to maybe reuse that timber. That's where the toxicity really came to a question. Can we reuse this lumber? So I thought sort of a lot of the avenues for the testing came about more from the angle of can this wood be reused and mitigation measures.
Right,
in this
and
project deal with reusing lumber. And
Right.
it was important to several community members here about what is the toxicity of that lumber. Maybe we don't want to reuse that lumber. So-
And as far as our normal process goes, we are well ahead of when we would even consider the preliminary site investigation. And I think that, of course, was driven by the concern that the community had. And that's what initiated these studies. Warren?
Is there something that can seal the arsenic and chromium in the wood better, or?
Possibly. Certainly a question that we welcome on a comment card.
Did you say seal the lumber?
Nope.
Yeah, that's what he asked.
That's what he
asked. And what did you answer?
Please put your question on the comment card.
I have a question about the process that's going on.
Sure.
Because is this being done, this EIR being done in-house by Caltrans?
Yes.
Okay, so all of you are employees of Caltrans and it's not going to be farmed out to consultant?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Sir.
Maybe you could put this in perspective for us. Where does the EIR fit in the scheme of the decision-making and the other points when the community may come together?
The draft environmental document is, and we've actually, on the back sheet here of this agenda, you'll see where we have EIR steps. And the draft environmental document will not be circulated right now. Our tentative circulation date is April 1st of 2016. And Sandy, maybe talk a bit about when that occurs.
So what we'll do in the draft document, we'll look at the different alternatives and the environmental impacts associated with the different alternatives, and we'll disclose what the potential impacts to various resources. As we were discussing, obviously, there's treated wood issues, hazardous waste issues. There's also potential for impacts to some listed species. And what we'll do is when we finish writing the document, and there's other, the bridge is eligible at this point. I know we're still waiting to see where the process with SHPO is on its determination of eligibility. Then in the draft document, we will be circulating that to the public for review. And during that time, we'll have a public hearing, and then we'll have court reporters, and then we can comment to it. So we actually, on this project, we actually know more than we usually do at this early in the stage. I know we've had the PSR, Project Study Report, PSSR, a preliminary study report.
VA value analysis.
Value
study.
analysis. So we've looked at some of these. We've done a lot of vetting of different approaches, the different alternatives. And so we're going to be putting a lot of that information together, and that's going to be one of the, once we, public reviews it and makes comments to what the impacts are, from that point, then we will finalize the document, we'll look at the comments, respond to them, and we'll pick a preferred alternative at that point in the final EIR.
Well, we don't actually pick, as far as the project development team will make a recommendation,
Yes,
myself
recommendation.
included, we'll make a recommendation on what the preferred alternative we believe should be. But ultimately, it'll be the district director and headquarters that will make that final decision on what that preferred alternative will be in conjunction with the regulatory agencies.
Yes.
In the meantime, we'll see the draft report, we'll
Yes.
see the value analysis, we'll see the life cycle.
Yep.
Cost analysis, correct.
So that'll be all available to us.
That's
Yes.
correct.
So all, and the studies will all be available also. So,
And Linda's got a question.
Yeah, why is this being separated from the Salmon Creek Bridge and the approaches? Why is it?
The environmental document type for Albion is an EIR, whereas for Salmon Creek, it's an ISMND. Let me explain for that, okay? That's an initial study mitigated negative declaration. So it's a different environmental document type under CEQA than the Albion River Bridge. We're here just to talk about Albion River Bridge. And maybe Sandy can talk a bit more about what an ISMND is.
okay, so at this point, the Salmon Creek project, it's been scoped as an initial study. Right now, we're going through and looking at the potential impacts at this point. This is what we're proposing, that it's a mitigated negative. It could be an EIR depending if we find impacts associated with that project that could be not mitigable. So at this point, it basically looks at all the same resources. I mean, there's a lot of similarities between the two projects, other than this is obviously a wooden bridge, that one isn't, but we have similar species that may be, you have the listed host plants for the butterfly, the blue,
Barren silver spot butterfly.
silver spot, and some other,
And
and
the
they have some
lotus blue.
cultural resources out there that we're looking at. But there's, so it was a separated project because they had two separate, basically schedules, and but a lot of the project area does overlap. So.
So can I have a follow-up question to that? Then?
Certainly.
How do you do cumulative effects analysis if you've separated the two? You've already determined that there are not significant impacts for the Salmon Creek Bridge that can't be mitigated.
We haven't made that determination. Once we're projecting that at this point, as we look at the impacts associated with the Salmon Creek Bridge, at what we can see that we can mitigate all the impacts. That's why we're looking at it. As we get further through the process with Salmon Creek Bridge, and if there is something that, regarding the cumulative impacts, we will be analyzing the cumulative approach on both projects, and we will look at that at this point. Right now, that's what we're scoping it as preliminarily. Well, one of the reasons I think that this project, why this is an EIR, is that we have a bridge that is eligible for the register. And under CEQA, that is a significant impact if we impact, and is it mitigable? I don't know, probably not. You're looking at depending on the alternatives that we pick.
Let me add to Sandy's answer. We are putting together a community impact assessment. We actually have a task order in draft form, but we will not be able to have that funded until after the beginning of the fiscal year, July 1. And then we'll have the consultant, most likely AECOM, but the consultant hasn't been selected yet for the new on-call environmental contract, perform the community impact assessment. And part of that will include the impacts from the Salmon Creek project. Question back here?
Have any samples been taken from the river itself, and have any samples been taken from the soil or the sand underneath the bridge that the water would be dropping into?
This is for Albion?
Yeah.
Not from the river, but Steve?
We've just looked under the bridge, and,
So directly water dripping from the bridge, not from the soil.
well, it comes down off the timbers, goes over those concrete footings, and it goes down through the sand into the groundwater. And so we've looked at we know it's on the concrete because we've tested the concrete with our X-ray diffraction machine. There's elevated levels of arsenic on that concrete that must have come from the bridge. We've sampled the soil right next to those footings, and there's arsenic in that soil. It's elevated. If you go a few feet away from the bridge footings, it's very low, near background. So it's going down right along the footings, and groundwater's at 5 feet.
It seems like that would offer mitigation right there, if it's very localized and concentrated.
Well, it's not. The sand isn't holding on to the arsenic. It's, you know, in solution. There's the quartz or the minerals in the sand really aren't holding on to it. It continues to travel, in my mind, right into the water. So we're not seeing it in the sand because the sand really isn't holding on to it. If it was a clay, it might have more arsenic in it because it could hold on to it better.
So is there speculation about what its ultimate?
I don't know any more than that, but it's going into the water. We did take a test of the water when we were there at the end of the summer, and we didn't see it.
Water, when you say water?
Right under the bridge. We drilled a hole, and we found the first water that could be impacted right there at 5 feet or 6 feet or 7 feet. Sure, there's a lot of tidal influence in there. Right, it's a very dynamic environment. We didn't see arsenic in those samples, but it was taken at the end of a dry summer. You know, there wasn't any input. There wasn't any leaching off the bridge, or maybe everything that leached off the bridge had dispersed. We could only imagine.
Just as a side, I know there's no drinking water sources on the flats whatsoever. They get their drinking water from the south side of the river.
Yeah.
There's nothing there that accesses any water on the flats they're drinking. So I'm not saying that makes it all right. I'm just saying.
And that is consistent with my observations too.
Leonardo?
So do I understand you have the elevation of the groundwater under the bridge? And is there a positive grading from that point down to the river?
It's going to be almost the same. It's going to fluctuate so much because of the tidal influence and the level of the river, and
so if there is a low tide,
it will be going towards. In my mind, from a geology perspective, it's going to be going towards the river and the ocean. Yeah.
Just to clarify, because you said, to your mind, it's in the groundwater, but you also said you drilled a 5-foot hole and it was not in the groundwater.
It wasn't. We tested there. I expected to see it. I didn't see it.
So currently, the tests indicate that there's no elevated levels of arsenic in the groundwater under the bridge.
Right. From the one test that we taken.
Hines?
Your NOP lists the agencies that you have contacted for comment. I don't see the politicals, the county listed. I don't see CAL FIRE, don't see the district hospital, highway patrol, thinking in terms of emergency vehicle access.
The agencies that were contacted were for regulatory permits, maybe Sandy.
Resource agencies, but we do communicate with the CAL FIRE and CHP when we look at, because we want to make sure that we're not having an effect on the basically emergency vehicle access and that. So we do consult with them, but this process we consult with our trustee agencies, which are Cal Fish and Wildlife, and also the responsible agencies, which is the Water Board. We have, let's see, in our federal agencies, you know, the Army Corps, U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Those are the folks that we tend, you know, Coastal Commission. They're all trustee and responsible agencies. That's who we're meeting tomorrow with. But we do consult with these other folks, like we even, if there's any potential for impacts, when we do the community impact assessment, if there's any regards to any potential impacts to the hospital and access emergency.
Any emergency services.
We will look at that and evaluate it and make sure that we plan to minimize our disruption into any of the services.
And that'll be part of your 30-day process?
That's when we solicit the comments from the different agencies and the different, the public and whatnot. And then as we go through and we're doing the studies, we'll actually be doing a community impact assessment where we actually go out and we actually interview the county and making sure that we're, you know, We'll talk with them, make sure that we're consistent with their land use. We look at their general plan, we talk with CHP, with the fire departments. We do a pretty thorough, we actually look at economic impacts. If we have any kind of economic impacts, we'll evaluate that in that report. And that will be part of the environmental document, as when people get to review the draft. All the studies will be also there available for review, so.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, Heinz. Okay, we had a question over here.
Well, I pretty much
Happy to answer.
by looking at your notice of preparation. I was curious about what were the major impacts that led you to categorize this as having to be an EIR?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I see the historical aspect is
That's
a big one.
That's a big trigger.
Endangered species is another.
We have found host plants for some listed butterflies, and so that's another
Were
trigger.
there any others that popped out? Because I think you have to have a number of them usually to elevate to this level.
Well, at this point, it's the bridge that was the trigger for the EIR, because there's a potential that we're not going to be, I mean, we're going to mitigate as much as we can, but it's the replacement that's an impact to registered property. At this point, Jennifer, do we have any other species that, other than the butterflies, that we have potential impacts?
The big one.
Yeah, the listed species. I mean, well, we will be consulting with NOAA and everybody else to make sure that we don't have impacts. We'll be doing various studies, essential fish habitat. We'll be thoroughly looking at any kind of potential impacts we have on other species, so.
Question?
I was just wondering, is there any plans for the state to purchase that property, or has it been purchased for a staging area?
Purchase what property?
The Albion Flats right here.
We discussed, in the value analysis study, there was a recommendation that the state consider leasing or possibly purchasing a portion of that property as a staging area for construction. Yes.
That's what I heard.
But, I mean, obviously, we're some ways away from any decision being made on that, because once a preferred alternative is selected, then we begin the work of PS&E, the plan, specification estimates, and part of that would be a construction scenario and what property would need to be acquired for staging for construction.
Well, the reason I'm saying that is I had heard grumblings that there was an annual kayak fishing tournament, and they're not holding it this year because the campground is being sold.
Well, if it was being sold, it wasn't to us.
Okay.
And I think that Carol even sent me an email. She'd heard that the campground, that we purchased the campground in the Headlands. So there are rumors abound.
Yes.
And feel free to contact me, and I'll give you the straight skinning. Phil Frisbee's got a comment. Phil?
Just to clarify, I double checked the public notice that I ran in the newspaper, and it lists that final comments are due May 7th, so that there's actually a little over 3 weeks from today.
Okay.
For the comments to get in.
Thank you. So again, I want to encourage everyone to mill around the room, talk to staff. We can help you articulate your questions and narrow down what comments you're really interested in getting down on the record. But again, I want to stress that we really want written comments here tonight. And if there's anything we can do to help you understand the information that we provided so that you can get those comments on paper, we're here to help you. Bill? And then I'll come to you, Hassan. Bill? You.
Jim.
Sorry, Jim.
Before we start milling, I just want to kind of announce to everybody and tell them about ACAB and what we're about, and invite you all to attend our monthly meetings, which are held right here on the fourth Thursday of every month. I'm Jim Hyde, and I'm the acting president of ACAB, and it stands for Albion Community Advisory Board, and we are a group of local, not even local, we are a group of citizens whose mission at this phase is to collect and disseminate information about this project. Right now, ACAB has not taken any kind of a formal stance as to rehabilitation versus replacement versus no build. Our stance right now is this is the time to let the professionals do their work. Caltrans has studies to do and data to collect. Independent consultants such as Hassan have studies to do and data to collect. After all of that is gathered, ACAB may or may not throw its weight behind one of those three options. But right now, we're independent, not an independent, we are a neutral group whose job is to just be the funnel and then the broadcast tower for all of the data that's coming in from everybody. Fourth Sunday of every month. Fourth Thursday of every month. And right here, 7 o'clock, and everyone is invited and encouraged to come.
Okay, one final question, Dr. Spelling.
First of all, I want to make sure that if any community member has questions, they ask first. If they don't, then I'll ask 2 questions. I'm planning to write, of course, input on this process and as best as I can, help the process, as Jim mentioned, to get the correct information to community, and they can decide whichever they vote. That's the democracy that we have in this country. You give information correctly, and people decide for themselves. My 2 questions is, one is actually about the, maybe to you, you know how much, I have to say that, Frank, please bear with me, I'm not going to talk about retrofit versus replacement. This is an environmental issue. You know how much contribution of concrete structures is to CO2 on the planet? The number is 7%. 7% of CO2 released to the planet comes from production of cement, concrete structure, dams, and demolition of concrete structures. So my question to you is, are you planning to include environmental impact in terms of basically global warming or climate change is the better word? And are you going to include full life cycle of construction, production, and creating a concrete structure, which will need a lot of forms, a lot of carbon footprint, versus what will be carbon footprint if you keep the bridge, so the existing bridge. That information should be clear in the environmental impacts.
Actually, that's a good question, because, and I hope you do put it on the comment card.
I will.
We do
Not comment card. I will submit my comments later.
Or submit it in any which way you want.
More formal way.
We will be looking at the impacts of our projects. We have a section on greenhouse gas that's required, and we will be looking at how our projects, we just don't look at greenhouse gas, we also look at sea level rise. We have to make sure that our project is consistent with the latest findings for sea level. I know that as an agency, we're really being proactive to try to reduce our carbon footprint. And I know we're going to be looking at that as we analyze our impacts in relations to the concrete and kind of just trying to improve alternative modes of transportation and other aspects. But we will be looking at that.
Thank you, that's great. The second question again, Frank, I'm not going to go discussing versus this versus that. We all understand that we are going to go to process of just creating factual data and giving it to we are doing that, I'm trying to do that, and that's why I'm bringing all this question. My last question is about, maybe goes back to Bill's concern, it's about the process. I've been to these kind of meetings in several cases, and the way it happens, for the benefit of others, we didn't have these kind of things until the 60s, and federal government came in and said that no more, you cannot just, developers cannot just build and ruin the planet. You have to have this environmental impact review and report and all of that. And then California came in, and that's when this act came in, that all developers, bridges, buildings, everything, you should have this hearing. This is a legal requirement on Caltrans. And then, before this happened, usually you would just do the study of bridge and figure out that this bridge should be replaced. And then design the replacement. And then propose it, make sure that it is safe. This was a requirement. It has to be safe, and it has to be functional, and it has to be economically feasible. Then you would go with that, those alternatives. Perhaps you would have some public hearing, and then you would decide. So it was safe, functional, transportation issues, and then also the issue of economic feasibility. I mean, you will come with alternatives that were economical. Now, in this case, it seems to me that, of course, before last August, these pictures and all this information was in front of public, and Caltrans had gone through that process of designing it and designing the retrofit, designing the new bridge and arch bridge, this stuff.
That's not true. We did not design the retrofit, we did not design the new bridge. What we did was an advanced planning study, which was conducted by Kevin Harper, and an APS, or an advanced planning study pricing update for not just the alternatives, but for the rehab alternatives as well. Those are preliminary only, those are not designs. And those, that's part of the process in order to actually secure programming.
Yes, yes, I should correct myself. I didn't mean you
You
design...
got a question in there, I know, Hassan. So let's get to it.
No,
Okay.
my question is this. If that process that you went through and did the preliminary design was...
Again, it's not a preliminary design, but go ahead.
It's preliminary assessment.
Correct.
In other words, let me put it directly. When you go to this scoping meeting, developers should have alternatives that are safe, that are functional based on requirements of project, and they are feasible as far as economics. Which means every information that was used for those alternatives stands. Now, in this case, the information that Caltrans uses for the benefit of everyone.
What's the question?
Yeah, what's the question,
Well,
Hassan?
What's the question?
Over and over in your investigations, you said the timber is rotten. And now you're standing here and saying that timber is not rotten.
No, we said
you're
that
asking us,
no, we basically relied on the Structures Maintenance Investigations Report, which said that the timber decking was likely rotten and needed to be replaced. The PDT, the Project Development Team, looked at that and in doing their due diligence requested that the timber decking be cored so that we could make a final determination on whether or not that decking needed to be replaced. That's for a separate project on the rehab of the bridge and the bridge deck. So when we develop alternatives, we develop them in advance because that's how the process is done. Back in 2009, the project development team developed a range of alternatives that would be studied and used for programming, because it's important that we provide headquarters with a range of alternatives that will be considered and what the cost of those alternatives would be so that we can secure funding in the future for that purpose. Then we go out and we take that range of alternatives and we begin to look at various preliminary studies, determine what the impacts are from those, and then we solicit from the community other ideas on not just the alternatives that we're looking at studying, but maybe other impacts that maybe we didn't think about that need to be included in the environmental impact report. So again, what's your question?
my question is, are you going, because when you presented these alternatives, and we are going to continue keeping these documents in the process.
That's correct.
Every time you're talking about the timber bridge, you state that Caltrans committee unanimously said the timber is deteriorated, most likely. It is even in your routine.
That was the Structures Maintenance and Investigation Peer Review Group in 2007, and that's part of the PSR back there. They made the recommendation that the cost, the life cycle costs for the existing timber structure were not sustainable, and that the bridge would need to be replaced. That's correct.
Are you going to keep that statement in your documents as we move forward?
Absolutely. That was a recommendation made by the Peer Review Committee. It's part of the record. There's no reason to remove that, no.
There's a statement similar to that in your 2014 routine inspection report. For those of you who are not familiar.
That's correct, and that was widely distributed to this group, and that was from Structures Maintenance Investigation, and they reaffirmed from what was said in 2007. You are correct.
So for the benefit of others, if I have only 10 seconds, routine inspection reports are required by federal government that the states submit that for every bridge. And the 2014 routine inspection report states that the asphalt is with puddles, and most likely that's because deck underneath is rotten and then is deteriorated, and then they recommend, because of all of these problems, that it should be replaced. This is in their routine inspection report of 2014. Now, that is
That
not
was
correct.
not the basis for replacement of the
No, my
structure,
question is not
and
that.
you've got a question in there, I'm sure, Hassan.
I'm
Let's
giving
cut
you
to
a
the chase and get to the question.
The question is this. There's a dilemma here. You have submitted a routine inspection report in 2014 to the
Right.
federal government saying that the deck is deteriorated. You have put the deck condition in condition 3 rather than 1.
That's structures maintenance investigation, that's correct.
It's the routine inspection that you submit to federal government as official statement of Caltrans signed by registered professional engineer. So my question is, are you going to call that report and correct it after you did the test?
As this whole community is aware, when we had maintenance go out and core the deck, structures maintenance investigation is going to provide a supplemental report that corrects that language on the condition of the deck. Does that answer your question?
In the routine inspection report that is submitted to federal
It'll be,
government?
that's correct, it'll be part of the supplemental structures maintenance investigation report.
That answers my question.
Finally, we got to that question. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and circulate around the room here in just a minute, but go ahead, we'll have one more question here.
Well, we have 2 more questions.
Okay, 2 more questions.
I'm not familiar with your scoping session, the EIR terms, but if you were saying you contacted the community, I just found out about the scoping session this morning, and only because I subscribe to a local listserv, and only because I read that, even though it said tomorrow, and I thought tomorrow, okay, Wednesday, and I read again and realized it's today. I mean, some of us get the message a day later with this listserv, and only a few people are on this listserv. So I am feeling that before you start the 30-day period, and I don't know how the law reads, but it seems to me if you're talking about an issue that affects everyone in Albion and beyond, that everyone should get a letter in the P.O. box at their physical home address if they
It's
don't
not the way
have
the
a
law
P.O.
reads.
box.
The law reads adequate public notice. Phil, when
Okay,
did we
what's
actually
the
publish that
public-
notification in the newspaper?
We ran it a week ago, we ran it last Wednesday in both the Mendocino Beacon and the and Fort Wright Advocate News.
Okay.
Yeah, not everybody reads the newspaper. I mean, I tried to read 1 or 2. I'm glad to hear that it wasn't.
And the way the law is written, to my understanding from being on public, is we have to run notice in local newspapers, major circulation, and those, we really only needed to run it in one, but we chose to pay the price just to try and get the word out.
And I've made an effort over this last year to get as many people as possible in this community on the group list server, my distribution list. And I've been adding people continuously over this last year, and I've been asking everyone here to go ahead and recirculate, post, contact your neighbor, and I think anybody that has got any of my emails will go ahead and confirm that they've been asked to go ahead and circulate that. Yes?
Okay, I appreciate all the work you've done. I know there was talks about it, but everybody leads busy lives and we can't always, wear 100 hats.
I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad too. And just to tack on to this, would it be possible to start the 30 days tonight and have 30 days actually from now on, from this scoping session? What prevents that from happening legally?
Well, the comment period starts when we submit when it gets to the state clearinghouse. And that's when the clock runs. I mean, we're actually adding an extra week, it sounds like, to the end of it.
It sounds like
We're actually doing 37 days, so you actually have extra time to actually
How
respond
does
to
it
it.
relate to the first newspaper article being, having been printed in terms of the state clearinghouse?
So usually what happens is that when we submit the form, the notice of, the NOE or the NOC over to the state clearinghouse, at that point, usually the coordinator works with PIO, which is Phil, and we run the newspaper ads right when it hits the state clearinghouse. So we try to give people the full 30 days to make sure, and like he stated, we ran it in the 2 different newspapers. So that's, it's CEQA requirement 30 days from when it gets to the state clearinghouse. So it's all informal. I brought my CEQA guide statute, so if you want to read it, it's kind of set up that way. But it's something that we can maybe look in the future when we run the draft. If you guys comment, the benefit is that we'll make sure that you guys get we'll at least send you a notice when the draft is out. So it's really important when you guys are here, you have your email address, your address in there, so that we'll make a point to send you at least a notice to say when the document is circulating. So in your case, like if you don't subscribe to the local paper, at least we will be able to send you that copy.
Let me just really quickly add while I'm plugging ACAB that we would love to add anybody to our mailing list. If you just send an email to acab@mcn.org and ask to be added to our email list, we'll join.
Question?
I have an easy one. I'm just curious, are you involved in the Hindi Woods Bridge over the barrel?
No.
I think that's a local project.
Yeah, it must be a local project. We're not involved. Bill?
I just wanted to
Yeah, we are
follow up
as
on,
federal highways.
what Hassan was asking. As I understood it, part of the projections that you did about maintaining that bridge were based on thinking that you had to replace the deck. Are those projections going to be looked at as well?
Absolutely, and that was a one-time evaluation for replacement of the deck, for the timber decking itself. So yes, that will be updated in the cost. And that will be reflected in the separate project, which is by our numbering system, OE 200, and that right now is in the hands of the project sponsor in District 1 and the program advisor in headquarters. And the project development team, the PDT, has made recommendations for various options for from materials for either bonded wearing course or full grind and repave, and has also made recommendations as far as the interim seismic retrofit. But those decisions are made by the program advisor as far as funding, and they're packaged in an updated project initiation document by the project sponsor, and then that comes back to the project development team, and then we take it and run with it from there. Okay? Welcome.
I just want to.
Sure, Kevin.
When I talked to maintenance, that the corings and the wheel lines were sound, but I mean, the deck is dry rotting at the edges, working its way in. So I mean, the structural concern is okay for right now, for the interim work, but I mean, the deck is showing deterioration on the outside, where the scuppers are, where the water drips over the edge of it.
Right.
Can the deck be replaced without replacing the uprights?
Pardon me?
Can the deck be replaced without replacing the support timbers?
Yes, the deck could be replaced, because without replacing the support timbers. But still, you've got the problem with the internal shear rings. That's another issue altogether, and the estimated remaining life of the timber itself. And I know that there's a lot of room for discussion on that, and we'll leave that for another time. But we've got our structural designer, Kevin Harper, here, and Tom Phillips, the project engineer and the supervising transportation engineer, Steve Hughes. So please feel free to ask them as many questions as you like, Hassan. We look forward to your comments.
All I need is the report of tests, any test that you do, including the deck test.
And as I mentioned in the email that I sent out, and I think that went out to Mary Walsh. Is Mary Walsh here by chance? No. Okay. And it was copied to everybody that's on my my listserv, my group email, that we're waiting for structures maintenance investigation to provide the supplemental report. And as soon as I get that, I'll distribute it. Thank you. Let's mill around the room.
Frank?
What? Yes.
Are we on your email list if we signed in?
You will be added. If you're not on there, you will be added to my list.
Well, can we ask of these people in a group setting as opposed to individually, so we all can hear the questions?
Yes.
Well, we want to, again, we want to get everything on a comment card, so if you have comments that are really centered.
But what if we have questions? I mean, there's so many things we don't understand, like for
Okay.
instance, I thought tonight was a time for input from the community that would then go to various state agencies that have something to do with this process.
No,
But
that's,
I'm totally confused.
no, did you get a copy of it? I sent, or are you on my, are you on my email list? Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so,
I'm right, Houston with them.
okay, several weeks ago I sent out the same information that's on here, okay?
Sure.
And